Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Hey Guys Law Gaming back again with another video. Today's video is going to cover what is needed to reliably extend the Valve Index HMD cable length. But before we get started, a quick disclaimer. None of the products presented in this video are paid advertisements to promote or distribute for the manufacturers. All of my recommendations are being made based on my personal research and testing experience. Also be aware that web links, PC specs, settings, and the cable extension performance benchmarks can be found in the description below. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's get into it. Now, there are two ways to extend your HMD cable length for your Valve Index. The first is to use an active USB 3 cable and an active or passive DisplayPort cable paired with an active coupler. The second method is to use an active USB 3 cable and chain link a premium PCIe 3.0 extension riser cable for up to a max length of 10 feet, which, mind you, is very unorthodox, expensive, and not exactly very clean, but it will work. Thank you, Linus, over at LTT. More on this later. Okay, now for the first method, as I mentioned, you will need an active USB 3 cable. Now, these three on the diagram here, I have tested all three. They are all 15 to 16 feet in length. All work perfectly fine. They all vary in different prices. I will say, though, that the one that I'm actually using is the pluggable, and the pluggable actually offers two different options. You have a 16-foot version and a 32-foot version. I have tested both. Both work perfectly fine. No issues whatsoever. Now let's get into the DisplayPort cable. So the DisplayPort cable, you need an active or passive high-quality DisplayPort cable paired with an active coupler, which is mandatory for best and reliable results. Now, just a quick note, there is a power setting that you will need to adjust on the power coupler or power booster. And what I've set mine to is 5 positive power pluses, meaning I've pressed the plus button 5 times to get 5 plus power on this particular booster. And that gave me the best results. That will vary depending on, obviously, your hardware and your use case. Now, be advised, though, that the quality and length of the DisplayPort cable will determine how well this method will perform. Now, why? Well, I'm glad you asked. So, a short but important digression. The Valve Index uses DisplayPort 1.3 and 1.4 compliance, which means that the total bandwidth is roughly 26 gigabits per second. Now, some of you are thinking, well, yeah, I already knew that, but did you also know that when you extend the length of the DisplayPort cable, the ability to reliably transmit the certified bandwidth of 26 gigabits per second degrades, which, as a reminder, is dependent on the quality and the length of the DisplayPort cable being used. Okay, so as an example, if you are using a short, high-quality DisplayPort cable, such as a 6-foot or a 10-foot, the amount of signal degradation is minimal. But if you use a mid to high-quality long cable, such as a 32-foot or longer, there will be more signal degradation. Now, the more signal degradation you introduce, the more performance loss will occur, which could require the user to rebalance their HMD settings by either lowering the refresh rate, super sampling, and/or game graphics. Now, I have created a few mediocre charts here to try to illustrate exactly what I mean. Now, if you look at the top, we have a red bar that pretty much illustrates the DisplayPort cable bandwidth. And it's actually 25.92 gigabits per second, but we're just kind of rounding off to 26. Now, I have 3 categories down at the bottom: frame rate and refresh rate, super sampling and resolution, and the third, game optimization, textures and models, game engine, things like that, game settings. So in a perfect world, if you have a, fairly decent system, maybe you're just going to run 90 hertz with 100 super sampling, and the game is optimized pretty well, you're doing great. You have plenty of headroom for bandwidth. You're probably not going to choke out too much. You're not going to see any projection. You're not going to have dropped frames. I mean, it's just going to run buttery smooth. But let's say you have a higher end system, or maybe you're on that, mid-range system, and you want to start pushing the limits of what you can do with your HMD. So let's say you bump up your refresh rate. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we bought these Valve indexes, because we have the ability to stretch our legs, if we will. So let's say we bump it up to 120 hertz. Okay. And we want to go ahead and put the super sampling, the resolution, to 125. But let's say the game is kind of meh when it comes to like the game optimization. Maybe it's got a lot of, complex textures, models. Maybe the engine isn't optimized very well. Okay. So at this point, we're probably going to do pretty good. We'll still be able to run the game in VR very well. We may experience a little small percentage of reprojection, maybe a dip in frame loss every now and again, but probably not much. For the most part, the game will probably still run pretty smooth. But what if we start really pushing the limits and we start bumping that, frame rate, refresh rate up to 144 hertz and the super sampling up to 150%? And maybe the game isn't optimized very well, or maybe the game just has a lot of complex textures, models, things like that in the game engine, which is one of the reasons I used Hellblade to benchmark, because not that the game is poorly optimized, but the game has a ridiculous amount of detail. It's an amazing game, beautiful in VR. If you haven't played it, definitely recommend it. It's an amazing game. But anyways, so as you can see in this chart, we're kind of redlining, like if you were redlining in your car. The only thing is we can't shift, we can shift down and, kind of obviously dial back our settings. But this is kind of in a perfect world where you have pretty much the best gaming PC money can buy at the current date, which I'm lucky and fortunate enough to have. And you're connected directly using the default cable to your PC. You're not using any extensions. Okay. Well, generally speaking, I mostly am going to play pretty much in the yellow where I'm at here, because I found trying to go into the red, even with a beast PC that I have now, it's just not the best gaming experience. It can be done, but there will be a lot more reprojection, stuttering, things like that. In some cases, it'll be somewhat acceptable. In other cases, not so much. Now, I've got another graph here to kind of illustrate what is going to happen when you extend your cable length, your DisplayPort cable length on your Valve Index HMD. Now, take these graphs with a grain of salt. Guess I should have said that already. I mean, it's not perfect down to the number. These are just to give you guys an idea of what exactly is going on. So earlier, up at the top, we have our full default red line at, we'll just say 26 gigabits per second. Now, let's say you introduce a DisplayPort extension. Maybe you've added 10 feet, 15 feet, 30 feet, whatever the case may be. And depending on the quality of the cable, whether or not you're using an active coupler or a boosted coupler like the one I've mentioned, you may or may not, that is going to play the factor on how much of a degradation in signal you're going to get. Let's just say, hypothetically, that you don't have the best cable. Maybe you're using a passive coupler. Okay. Well, I have gone ahead and done the math, and I have subtracted 10% of the performance. And again, this is just a guesstimate from the 26 gigabits per second. So now we have less bandwidth to work with, which means not only are we hitting red bars in 2 of our categories, but we're exceeding it. So now the performance is choking and we're getting more reprojection, more frame rate loss, things like that. Not a good experience. You don't want that. So, and I experienced this somewhat with my 32-foot cable during my testing. My 10-foot cable, for the most part, plays just as good as the default cable. I won't say exactly, but it's pretty damn close. If I were to put a percentage on the difference between the 10-foot cable and the default cable, I would say no more than 5% difference in degradation and performance. Now, this is for the most part where I play Hellblade, where it's for the most part buttery smooth. I run it at 120 hertz refresh rate. I actually play it at 130 super sampling. I can do 140. It's kind of, there are certain areas where 140 is going to struggle. When you look at my benchmarks that I will show later, there is a section of the game in Hellblade that is extremely intensive. And I did pretty much all my benchmarks in that area because it was the most intensive game in VR that I've been able to play. And that area was really choking out because normally I could play at these specs with my 10-foot cable, 120 hertz, not exactly 150 is actually 140 super sampling within the game, not within the Steam global super sampling. And even though I have the game listed as bad in regards to the game optimization, that's not exactly true. It's not that it's bad in as far as being poorly optimized. It's just bad because there is so much information in regards to the texture maps, the particle effects, the models, all the characters, the enemies in the game. And when you get to the area that I've benchmarked, that has been the most intensive area in all the games I've played so far, which is why I benchmarked it. And I could play in this area with these settings at this, roughly at this, except it's at 140. It is playable, but there would be some frame rate dips. So I wanted a much smoother gameplay, so I ended up going with roughly these settings here, except it's 130%. But this is to give you guys a little bit more of a visual aid and idea of what exactly is going on when you extend your cable length on your Valve Index HMD, and why, if you have to do it, you want to get the highest quality cable you can, get the power booster coupler that I have recommended. If you do that and you're able to play a game like Hellblade and at roughly these settings, you're going to be fine for other games like Beat Saber, because Beat Saber is no problem whatsoever. I can actually play Beat Saber at 144 hertz, at 150 super sampling, and the actual game optimization as far as modeling and texturing and the fact that you're only facing one direction is fantastic. It's really good. So there's no issues there. So like I said, I wanted to push the limits to find out exactly how far I can go with it. And based on my needs, the 10-foot cable will work for me, but some of you may actually need more than that. Now, earlier I mentioned that there was a second way to extend the Valve Index HMD cable length by using an active USB 3 cable with a premium PCIe 3.0 extended riser cable. The good news about using this method is that there is no signal degradation, provided you don't go over 10 feet. If you wish to see a working demo of this, I have Linus's tech tip video, link in the description below if you want to watch it. Now, the bad news about going this route is it's very expensive because it takes 3 1000 millimeter cables in order to equate to 10 feet of cable length, which is going to run you about $300. Then you will need a second power supply for your graphics card, and I would recommend building or buying a small enclosure for your graphics card and power supply. Now, some of you are probably wondering how I know this. Well, because I was investigating this particular method because I could not get any DisplayPort cable extensions to work until I finally found a way to do it. Okay guys, so now that I've covered what will work, I'd like to take a moment to discuss what was recommended by people on Reddit, the Steam forums, and Discord that just didn't work for me. I tried a passive male to female DisplayPort cable, both 6-foot and 10-foot. The ones in this diagram here are actually the cable matters. I tried the passive male to male DisplayPort with a passive female coupler, both 6-foot and 10-foot, and that did not work. I also tried an active fiber optic cable male to male DisplayPort, both 16-foot and 32-foot, with a passive female coupler. What I experienced in regards to why it didn't work. So with the passive cables, I experienced rainbow sparkle snowflakes and or intermittent HMD cutouts, where basically the HMD would just turn off or just black out, and it would either flicker or whatever. That just wasn't going to work. I will say that the active fiber optic cable gave me the best results, but still was not reliable. Now, I want to get into a little bit on my suspicions on why some people, like on Reddit, the Steam forums, and on Discord, were able to get these cables to work for them. Because, I mean, it doesn't make any sense for it to work for somebody else. Especially, I tried every cable. I didn't just try the Cable Matters. I tried various other cables. I can't even begin to tell you how many hours and different cables I tested only to come up with the same results. So I came to a conclusion. First off, I'm not going to say that those individuals were lying. I think they probably were able to get it to work, but I think I have a little bit of a theory on why they were able to get it to work. So here goes. I believe that these individuals were playing on probably mid-range systems, maybe even a high-end system, but they were playing at lower super sampling settings and lower refresh rate settings, and the games that they were playing were maybe low in graphical details. And if that is the case, if you remember earlier when I was showing you my graph charts, they probably weren't even coming close to hitting that bottleneck of the DisplayPort cable 26 gigabits per second bandwidth limit. So as far as power and throughput, they had a lot of headroom. But if you have a high-end system, as I mentioned earlier, and you're pushing the limits, as I obviously am able to do, it can't do it. So let me give you an example. So I could actually play Beat Saber near perfect at 120 hertz with an active DisplayPort cable, or an active DisplayPort optical cable paired with a passive female coupler. But I did get rainbow sparkle snowflakes. It was very subtle, wasn't very much. It was playable, but it never cut out or anything like that. However, when I tried to play a game like Hellblade, a highly graphically demanding game, as I mentioned earlier, the game would just be riddled with rainbow sparkle snowflakes. I mean, it was more obnoxious, and ultimately the HMD would just cut out, and that occurred even at the lowest settings at 90 hertz with 100% super sampling. So that is my suspicions on how others were able to get these cables to work. And mind you, there weren't very many people. Most people have been unsuccessful with this. And that is part of the reason why I wanted to really investigate this. I mean, because I guess it just goes to show how badly I really wanted to do VR, because it is pretty amazing. And hopefully we get more content like Asgard's Wrath and games along those lines that are really going to push VR into a new era, because in all honesty, before, it isn't worth it for the average consumer to get into it. And I know a lot of VR fanboys are going to get mad for me saying that, but it just isn't. But I think that's changing, and it's still slow, but we're definitely in a better place, and it's only going to get better. Now, earlier I mentioned that I have DisplayPort extension testing performance benchmarks with links down in the description. I invite you to watch them to understand my testing methodology that led me to my conclusions. I compare the default versus 10-foot versus the 32-foot cable length performance. Now, over prolonged usage, the 10-foot cable played near identical to the default cable, while the 32-foot cable did struggle and would benefit best at reducing either the refresh rate, the super sampling, and/or game graphics to match the performance of the 10-foot cable, which is something I would just as soon avoid. So the link in the description for these benchmark tests, I'm actually going to put the whole playlist in the description. You don't have to obviously watch them all, but they're there for you to consume and dissect as you will. Okay guys, that is the end of my video. If you guys have any questions or comments to discuss, please post them in the comments section below. Remember to like, dislike, and subscribe. Furthermore, if you guys have found this information to be of benefit and you are so inclined, I do have a donation link listed in the description below and on my Twitch page. Donations are never expected, but are always very much appreciated. Thank you for watching, and as always, guys, keep gaming. Oh, I know what that is. That's a brain sucker. He's trying to disguise himself. Well, you know what? Fuck that motherfucker. I got something for his ass. Whoa! Shit! The fuck out of here. No! No! Get off! God damn it! It's gonna suck my fucking insight. Shit! Oh, fuck no, dude. No! God damn it! What a motherfucker, dude. What a fucking asshole.